Good morning, Magic players. Welcome to the morning show where we discuss all things Magic the Gathering. Get your questions fired up because we're going to have a fire discussion today. We also do Decklist review. So if you got a 75 you would like to get some feedback on, or if you have a spicy list to share with us, you're in the right place to bring it to, because both myself and the community will give you that feedback. So brew up your cup of coffees. So let's brew up some magic this morning. Welcome to Coffee and MTG for March 26th, 2021. I am your host, Nikachu, the Merfolk Master. But today we are not alone. We are not alone. Today I have a very special guest to bring on the show. Someone who has resurrected Esper Control. If everyone's trying to figure out what is the best control deck in the modern metagame, they're looking at blue-white. They're looking at Jeskai, at Blue-Red Moon. Someone decided, you know what, let's play Esper Control. It's well positioned right now. It's got the right removal for the threats and won the Modern Challenge just last week. I would love to bring on Control Master, TSPJendrek. Thank you very much for coming onto the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. What up, everybody?
What's up, everybody? Exactly.
Yeah, I'm here with my cup of... I'm only drinking water, so... mine has Ron Swanson on it. Not Nikachu, but
mine has my logo, but yeah, it sounds great. So anyway, is it TSPJendrek or Jedrek?
It's Jendrek.
Okay, so your actual username is Jendrek.
Oh yeah, okay, I understand. Yeah, this is just my proper name. Well, it's actually Jędrzej, but it's way harder for everybody to pronounce if you are not from Poland, and also I don't like
the ow.
Yeah. Jędrzej is like my birth name, so to speak, but Jędrek is like going by Mike instead of Michael or whatever.
Right. All right. It's the same name. Great. So here's the deal. All right. So for those who are not familiar with you, why don't you give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you came to be this Control Master?
Okay, so I started playing Magic almost 20 years ago now. When I was like a young kid.
Oh wow, you're a real boomer.
Yeah, I'm almost 27 now, and I started playing Magic like in second grade or whatever. And obviously, first few years were just tabletop with my friend in home, so nothing really special. My first tournament was Shards of Alara pre-release in 2008, and ever since then, I've been playing a good bit of competitive Magic. My first GP was like in 2013, I guess, something like this. And I would say my biggest success is top 8ing one GP in my life. I top 8ed GP Warsaw in 2017. It was a standard tournament, and I top 8ed with God Pharaoh's Gift. Then I played one PT, which I scrapped from with a 1-7 record. So not great.
You got that one win in, though. You got that.
I got one win, and I was one place above in the standings, above LSV. So
there you go. That's all you need to beat.
Yeah. If he can slip up, so can I. Yeah. It doesn't matter that it's my only PT, and he played like 1,000 of them or whatever. But yeah,
no one hears those records when they go 1-7. You don't hear about them very often.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm actually proud of it. I'm gonna show you something.
It's time for show and tell here. Don't ruin your setup.
So I guess I just demolished my room completely, but I'm gonna find it in a second. I have a very nice token that I got, or like more of a souvenir that I got from my friends. I'm gonna show you in a second.
Sure. Okay, you go find it. And I'm going to say good morning to everybody right now. All right, good morning, Louise, Donaldson, Peyton. Good morning, Aaron, Mateusz, Jin Dobre. That's right, good morning. Louise, Hot, Cold Man. Good morning, Ugly Johnny Zinek. Good morning, Straw Boss, Frick Curry. Good morning, Thomas Penny. And the Iron Warlock. Greetings to everyone. I just finished my coffee for the night. And Madcap Skills, good morning. Halfway Joel, good morning. Yeah, it is Esper Day. It's going to be an Esper day today. We're going to hopefully learn the ins and outs of Esper control in today's modern metagame because TSPJendrek has actually been killing it. And now, as I can show you right here, we've got tons of results, especially recent results with Esper control. And actually, it looks like you evolved it from Esper Delver. There was some sort of evolution here from Esper Delver to Esper Control. We're going to have to hear all about that evolution.
All right.
Okay, you got the token?
I've got the token. It's not even a token. It's an actual magic card. It's a 1/7 Looming Altisaur that I've gotten to commemorate my 1-7 record from my friends.
Ah, perfect.
And it's my badge of honor.
The badge of honor, excellent. I love it. Okay, well, tell us a little bit about Esper Control. What is the evolution of this deck? Because you are an incredibly talented control player. I mean, you've been playing a lot of control for a long time. It looks like almost that you started with Esper Delver and decided, you know what, scrap Delver, let's just go full-on control.
Oh, actually, Delver was a deck that I've played pre-Euroban. This was my solution deck to Valky meta. Okay. I've had a winning record against Valky with this deck. My sample size wasn't that great, but I felt good about the matchup. Sure. And I've consulted with many players that I respect. And once I showed them the deck, they felt that it's well positioned. We only got 1 week of the meta, and for what it's worth, I really enjoyed it. I think meta games like the Valky meta game are very interesting, but for the very short period of time. Like I'm fine with having such a broken metagame every year for 1 week, and because I think it's very the process of finding if there is a deck that can beat the best deck is very interesting to me. But once we arrive at the conclusion, whatever the conclusion is, then it starts being pretty.
It gets boring really fast.
Boring, yeah, really fast. I actually in the final version of this deck, I've actually played with the Modern Horizon All-Star Icehide Golem, which is a 1 snow for a 2/2 golem, and that's it. It's a 1 mana 2/2, and it was actually pretty decent because 4 Ascendant Spirits were a bit too much because you never have mana for them, and a golem can just attack. Also, the deck was way heavier counter spells. Inquisitions were in there. Spell Pierce was insane in this meta, but yeah. Not too much to talk about the deck.
Okay, well, how did we end up on Esper? Give us a little insight into why this version of control. Not only are you winning the most with it, because I think control players are a little iffy about what's the best control deck, but you seem very confident about Esper control right now, and you've got some results to back it up.
Yeah. I've played ever since I first jumped onto Esper train. Oh well. So a bit of a background. Esper was my last deck that I've played in what I like to call the old modern, which is pre-Throne of Eldraine. So before Oko, before all of this stuff, Esper was the last deck I've played before I started playing Oko, and I actually really liked it. I had a pretty decent finish at 1 GP in Birmingham. I've had a top 16 PTQ finish with it, and I was pretty satisfied with it. Then Oko and Duro came along and everything, so we just had a bunch of degenerate stuff for over a year. And then after Uro got banned, the first thing that I've got going in the post-ban world was actually Esper, because I've had a fond memories of it. But my problem was that I couldn't really balance the mana in a way that was satisfactory to me, because I think I was too high on Field of Ruin, which is actually not a very good card right now. I don't think it's needed. And once you cut Field of Ruin from the main deck and you just go all in on colored lands, you can actually also go heavier on filter lands. And I think filter lands, I'm playing 3 filter lands. 1, Sunken Ruins, 2, Mystic Gates. I think they are crucial to the mana base. And they make casting stuff like Archmage's Charm way easier, because you can afford to play Godless Shrine, and with Godless Shrine you have enough turn one sources for Fatal Push. It's a lot of things that are going in the right places once you get rid of Field of Ruin. And when the mana is good, I think the deck is just clearly the best control deck, because you get access to every strong option that you have. Because you have the best removal spell in Fatal Push.
Yep.
You have the best sweeper in Supreme Verdict. You have the best win conditions, which are, as much as I love Jace the Mind Scalper, I think Teferi is a bit stronger now. I still think that 2-2 split is the best option, but Teferi is insanely strong. The fact that your opponent can't use Skyclave Apparition to get rid of it, it's very, very important with Heliod, which is the best deck in my opinion in Modern.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen your video yesterday, and you said that Heliod is number 2, that Shadow is number 1. It's, in my opinion, defensible. I think the fact that Heliod has a good matchup against Shadow puts it over the top, because these are like the 2 best decks. But it doesn't really matter. But yeah, the fact that you can get Skyclave Apparition on Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, is super, super important. And
from my perspective, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria is very hard to attack from multiple angles. I mean, besides Jace the Mind Sculptor, I mean, this thing gets higher loyalty. It like is sort of cheaper because it's effectively 3 mana most of the time. You spend 5, but you get 2 mana back.
Yeah, it's very tanky. It's very tanky. It gets up to 5. It can protect itself with the 2 mana that you just mentioned. And a very common sequence of going turn 5 Teferi into Mana Leak is as devastating as you can expect it to be. Like, you can establish your board, then answer whatever threat they want to play on their turn. It's very, very strong, definitely. So yeah, I know that other players are trying different decks. I think Blue-White is pretty universally worse than Esper, as long as I said, Field of Ruin doesn't matter, and there are not so many Blood Moons around. But this deck is better against Blood Moon than people think. It's obviously worse than Blue-White, but it's still not terrible. And yeah, because Path to Exile, in my opinion, is maybe not unplayable, but it's way, way worse than Fatal Push. I was actually playing almost the same number of Ousts as Paths in my Blue-White decks, because pathing a Monastery Swiftsphere is just such a terrible feeling on turn 1. Like, you just can't do it, because you want to give more mana to a deck with Lures of the Dream Den, or with, I don't know, Storming Entity, Lava Dart, all these Canopy lands. Like, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And you don't really need Path to Exile once you have Fatal Push and Chaos Guile, which is, in my opinion, one of 2 main reasons to play this deck. I think Chaos Guile and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, are 2 best white cards that you can play in this deck. And the fact that Chaos Guile is such a versatile tool, that one of those modes is probably good against 95% of Modern decks. And if you happen to stumble upon a matchup against which at least 2 modes are good, and that's the majority of matchups, this card is just insane. And the fact that you can Entwine it for 6 mana, and it stabilizes almost nearly every board, it's just so good. Because you have a main deck Graveyard Hate. You have a main deck Life Gain, which is, I think, very, very underrated. My biggest problem with one of my biggest problems with Blue-White, because the biggest is Path to Exile, obviously, but the fact that you can't really play a playable main deck Life Gain card. Like, Timely Reinforcements is a pretty awkward card to have in your main deck, mostly because it's a sorcery. So you won't tap out for a sorcery against like a combo deck. And with Chaos Guile, it just plays so well into Esper Charm, Archmage's Charm, Cryptic Command Plan. If they do nothing, you can just use your mana in the end step for like a multitude of different things. And because of how many of these modal spells you have in your deck, you can just adapt to almost every situation. Because if you count it generously, you have 5 charms, then 2 Chaos Guiles, then 3 free cryptics, that's 10. Then you have 4 Snapcasters and 4 Planeswalkers that can do different things. And if you count all of this, this is over half of your spells that can do different things. And this is the kind of versatility and like adaptability that is super important to control decks, and especially in like more open formats. That's very important in my opinion, and one of the main reasons I like Esper over any other option.
What particular matchups? I mean, you just said that this card is very flexible, basically against anything. But are there any particular matchups where this is really good? It's super premium.
Yes, definitely Dredge. Against Dredge is very important. So one Chaos Guide won't stop them almost never. Like from time to time, if they mulligan to 4, then maybe one Chaos Guide is enough. But it's very, very rare. But because, especially after Sideboard, you have 2 Chaos Guide and 2 additional copies in the Sideboard. So you have 4 Chaos Guide, and you have 4 Snapcaster Mages. So it's not that hard to cast 2 copies of Chaos Guide or 1 Chaos Guide and Snapcaster Mage in the first 5 turns of the game. And casting the card 2 times is usually enough to slow them down to the point in which you can resolve Teferi or Jace or Monastery Mentor and start taking over the game. So this is by no means a rest in peace quality effect. It is just a way to slow them down so you can take over the game. Against all the red decks with Monastery Swiftspear, the card is very important. The problem with blue-black and bug decks that I've played before was that you can't really deal with Stormwing Entity. And if you're, for example, you're on the play, and even if you don't have a counterspell for Stormwing Entity, they play on Stormwing Entity on 2 of Mana Morphos, which is the best case scenario. And then you just untap and you play Chaos Guide. And you gain 4 life, which is actually very, very... I think it's maybe not more relevant than against Burn, but it's surprising how much burn power Blue-Red Prowess has, even though Blue-Red Prowess has 4 bolts, 4 lava darts, and then like 2 burst lightnings or something. They don't have that much direct damage, but because they can churn through their deck so fast, they can amass the critical amount of burn in their hand, and it's not that uncommon that you lose the game against Prowess on turn like 15 if you can't find your Planeswalker, and they just dealt you 15 points of burn or something like this. So I think this 4 life, this 4 life security from Chaos Gale is very, very important. So definitely I would say against Price Amalgam and Monastery Swiftspear, that's very important. Another matchup in which this card is crucial is Eldrazi, because it's a clean 1-for-1 answer to Reality Smasher. Because you don't have to sacrifice. You don't have to discard a card to Smasher because it doesn't target, and because none of the modes targets actually, you can't stop this card with Veil of Summer, which is also very important against decks like Jund Death Shadow, for example. It's just such an amazing card in my opinion.
Excellent. So for anyone out there, if you have any questions for TSPJendrek about control, please let us know. Give me 3 question marks before the question, 3 question marks after the question. It'll help me find your questions amongst all the comments. So you said that this Esper just has all the removal ready for like the metagame. What do you think are any other advantages you find with Esper control over, say, blue-white control right now in Modern?
So it's mostly about the metagame. I think the format is very creature heavy, and if you just see what decks are on the top right now, even if you don't want to discuss the order of those, I think Heliod, Death Shadow, and Monastery Swiftspear red decks are the 3 most popular, if not the best decks.
Right.
So more often than not, you have to deal with early pressure. And because of that, I think, as I've said before, Esper is just superior because you get the best point removal and the best sweeper. I played blue-white before or blue-black before, so yeah. After the bans,
right? Yeah, you love your blue-black as well.
Yeah, I built Esper. Then I wasn't super into the mana base, so I decided to build a 2-color deck, and blue-white was pretty bad in my opinion. So I turned to blue-black, and I was kind of okay with blue-black, but it lacked some staying power. It lacked the staying power of Teferi Hero of Dominaria and of card like Chaos Gale. So these 2 cards were the first cards that I splashed, and once I already dipped into white, with the help of Mystic Gate, splashing Supreme Verdict wasn't that hard. There's an argument to play Damnation because it's easier on mana, but I don't buy it. The fact that you can pitch Supreme Verdict to Force of Negation, the matchups in which it's bad, is super important. Getting this free pitch against stuff like Storm, pre-board, because post-board they have empty awareness, but against Storm, against any Living End combo deck, against Blue-White, all these decks against Tron, it's very important. And yeah, it's mostly the trade-off of better. So I think that Blue-Black and Esper are very similar decks. Then Blue-White is a bit different. Blue-Black and Esper is basically the same deck, which operates on your opponent end step, and then you just want to slam your big Planeswalker to close out the game. And Blue-White is more tap out, a bit more sweepers, a bit more cheap Planeswalkers like Teferi or Narset. And I think cheap Planeswalkers that can't really defend themselves aren't that great in the face of Monastery Swiftspear. So you don't want to just play them. You'd rather play instants that you can use on your opponent's end step. They can't attack your instants, but they can attack your Teferi. So yeah, it's basically the trade-off of more power for a bit worse mana base, and with how the format looks right now, I think the trade-off is definitely in favor for Esper.
Excellent. Okay, so Thomas Penny has a question. Any consideration to creature lands like Creeping Tar Pit, Shambling Vent, or Celestial Colonnade?
Okay, so I have a pretty strong opinion on manlands. I think manlands are unplayable because they are tap lands. And tap lands are just so bad in your deck when you are trying to interact on curve. So basically the way I like to look at my utility lands is that you have to think about the land part first and the spell part second, because the fact that Creeping Tar Pit enters the battlefield tapped every single time you played it comes up 100% of time. You will never play an untapped Creeping Tar Pit. But how often will you animate it? Once every 20 times you draw it, every 15, every 30, it doesn't matter. But it's so much more important that this is a Dimir Guildgate 100% of the time, and then a manland like 10% of the time or 5% or whatever. And let's compare it to the utility lands that are, in my opinion, actually good, which are castles. Because, for example, Castle Vantress, I'm only playing one copy in my deck list because I can't really fit in the second copy with these requirements. I would really like to play a second copy, but this is basically a non-basic island every single time. It's 100% of the. It's probably 95% of the time. It's just an untapped blue source, and then the scry ability comes up every, I don't know, 10, 20 matches. It's actually pretty good. So the fact that the land part of Castle Vantress is so much better than the land part of your manlands just puts it over the top for me. I would play Castle Ardenvale as well if I don't have Archmage's Charms in my deck, probably. So yeah, I definitely favor Castle Vantress over manlands, especially with how nice it is with Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, because you can just scry, untap, scry again, and you dig through your deck very, very fast.
Excellent. Rodrigo Miguel Sibin asks, thanks for putting Esper on the map. One of the debatable cards of your list is River of Tears. Is it a personal choice for some reason, or any blue-black land could make the cut? Okay,
this is, I think, by far the most common question I get about my list.
That's a one-of.
That's a one-of. I actually started with more copies. So I've had a good deal of success with River of Tears in blue-black decks. And then when I built Esper, I initially put 2 copies in it, and it kind of underperformed. It was still okay, but it wasn't as good as in blue-black. And it's basically the the biggest point of contention I have with other people who are playing this deck. For example, I know that Gabriel Nassif likes to play this deck a lot right now, and I'm discussing cards with him all the time, and he's very high on the list, and he's basically playing the same 59 cards in the main deck outside of the one River of Tears, and he said that he will never play this card again, and he's actually playing Creeping Tar Pit instead of it, which I think is a mistake. But I think what you need to realize about this card is what took me a lot of time and a lot of thought to arrive to what I think is a good conclusion, which is this is not a proper blue-black duel. This is basically a basic island that can cast turn 1 Fatal Push. So you have, when you are constructing your mana base, you have to think about it as a mono blue land, and then you have to fill up your black source requirement. And right now, like my initial deck list had 2 River of Tears and 12 other black lands. And this was just not enough because I was short on black. But then I switched to only 1 River of Tears. I've added 1 Drowned Catacombs. I've added Godless Shrine over second Hello Fountain. I switched some numbers in the mana base in general. And now I have 1 River of Tears and I have 14 other black sources, which is definitely enough for everything. But if you count this River of Tears, then you only have 12. For example, most common suggestion, which is actually not that terrible, like people are saying a lot. For example, in chat, Gerald Jacobs says that I just play Drowned Catacombs, I think, instead. And this is the most common suggestion because it's a land that has a very good track record in Esper in general. And I agree that the land is very good in the deck, but if you just make this change, you are adding the 15th stable, so to speak, black source to your deck, which is just not needed because you don't have any double black cards. And every single black card is 100% or like 95%, whatever, enough, satisfied enough with 14 sources. But then you are cutting 1 untapped black source on turn 1 for Fatal Push. And I think this is very important because, as we established earlier, you want to answer Monastery Swiftspear on turn 1 because this is the type of format you want to do that in. So if you are cutting your turn 1 black sources, it's just bad. Why would you do this instead of playing this land, which can cast Fatal Push on turn 1 without you losing any life on the draw, which is the most important place for it to be? Because if you can't kill Monastery Swiftspear on the play on turn 1, because, for example, you play a tap land or whatever, it only will attack you once. But if you do it on the draw, they will attack you twice. So the difference is fairly huge. So I think the mana base is actually very well built. Like I think I've spent a lot of time on it, and I'm a very, very big opponent of cookie cutter mana bases. I don't like just people. I think people are got kind of used to it because of Uro and Amnav. Your mana base was just X fetch lands, Y shock lands, Z basics,
whatever,
and some Mystic Sanctuaries, and you didn't play any non-fetchable or non-fetch lands. And now, when you actually have so many different options, it's important to min-max your mana base because it's very hard for me to believe that a correct option is either 2 River of Tears, 0 Drowned Catacombs, or 2 Drowned Catacombs, 0 River of Tears instead of a split. Like, it's very hard for me to imagine that just having a 4/4/4 mana base is better than having all these one-offs, which are complements each other very nicely. So I'm adamant about River of Tears, and I think it's definitely a card that you should play in exactly 1 copy with these spells. Like, if the spells change, if you, for example, add some double black spells, or if you change the overall spell suite in the deck, every single time if you change a spell, you have to think about how it affects mana base. And if it does, and in some other mana base, 2 River of Tears are better because you just crunch the numbers, then play 2. If in some other mana base you only want to play, or you want to play 0 copies, then go for it. For example, very simple scenario, Monastery Swiftspear gets banned, Death Shadow gets banned, everything that attacks on turn 1 gets banned. So you are in a format with Primeval Titan, Tron, Reality Smasher, and you want Path to Exile over Fatal Push. And your 1 mana removal is Path to Exile instead of Fatal Push. You don't want River of Tears because there's no reason for it. Because you don't have black mana 1-drops, you only have black mana 2-drops, and Drowned Catacombs is very, very good at casting 2-drops instead of 1-drops. So it's just a question
we need Fatal Push on turn 1. That's
exactly
just the bottom line. If we don't have it, you're going to get run over in this meta game.
Exactly.
Swiftspear comes in all forms too. It comes from like prowess decks, but also comes from burn. It also comes from some shadow decks. So like, prepare for it.
Yeah, it's just about min-maxing your chances to cast your spells on curve, and it's not a super high percentage if you switch to Drowned Catacombs, but you will lose probably like half or 1% more games, which doesn't seem like much, but like it's very hard to get all those percentages up. I think I've played around 140 matches with Esper in the last month, and I'm sitting at around 69% win rate, close to 70, which is I think pretty respectable, given the fact that I think most of these were in leagues, and there are a lot of like more casual players in leagues. They are not grinding as hard. They are trying out their stuff. So leagues are pretty soft in my opinion, and like a lot of people like to say that they've got a lot of trophies in leagues, which I don't think is that important, because once again, if you are playing like 8 leagues per day, I know people who play 8 leagues per day because they are just grinding. They are playing decks like
that league in like 45 minutes with some decks.
Exactly, like you are just grinding with prowess. You are grinding with Death Shadow, with stuff like this. You can play a league under an hour, and you are just making it a full-time job. 8 hours, like day in day out. You're sitting there just like you are going to a factory or something. You are just checking your card in the entrance. You are playing 8 leagues, then you are out of it, and you can just farm up so many leagues and so many trophies, but you can't just farm challenges or PTQs this way, because there is a finite number of PTQs, and you like every grinder will play this 1 PTQ per week or 1 PTQ per month or 1 challenge, whatever. So you got in these challenges and premier events of any other type, you really see who's good in Modern, in my opinion. Like there are people who are very high on trophy leaders or on trophy leaderboard, but they also win in challenges, and I think like it's definitely a sign that they are good. There are some people who have a lot of trophies, but you never see them in challenges. And sure, they have a different skill set, but I don't think the number. Like basically, what I'm saying is that I don't think the number of trophy reflects on anything. And if you are just new to Modo and you see someone on the top of the leaderboard and you are paired against them, just don't assume they are like gods of the game. Just play and maybe you will beat them. I don't know.
Well, you can technically you can still beat anybody.
Yeah, and I think that's
LSV, bring it on.
That's great about Magic. I think like this is why Magic has been around for so long, because the best people in Magic probably have, like on the PT state, they have like 65-70% win rate. If they were playing leagues on Modo or whatever, they would have probably maybe 75-80. Like 80% win rate is insane in Magic. And in other games like chess, like if you are the best, you have nearly 100% win rate. You are just smacking everyone who's worse than you, and it doesn't happen in Magic. And I think that's the beauty of it. You can win against people who are better than you, so you don't just get so disincentivized to play Magic because you are losing against everyone. You can, like, it's not that uncommon for me. For example, before the pandemic, I've worked in my LGS, and it wasn't that uncommon to me to lose to someone who played their second tournament just because I got unlucky and they got lucky and they played okay. And the fact that they can beat someone who's been working for God knows how many years in the store, and they are going to all these GPs and all the tournaments and they are talking about it, and you just beat them. It's such a big motivation for you if this is your first, second, third, whatever, 10th tournament, that I think that's, once again, that's the beauty of Magic. I think it's very, very important that it's the way it is.
Right. Charles, thank you very much for the super chat, but you have to submit your deck list during deck list review. We'll definitely have that today, but everyone has a fair chance at deck list review. But MTG Ectoplasm, thank you very much for the super chat. And he has a question. How do you feel about the matchup against spirits? Which spirit creature is a problem for control decks?
Okay, so I think the biggest problem for control deck in general is not a spirit, but it's Ether Vial. I think that spirits has always been good against control. But I think spirits are only good if you are really good at drawing Ether Vial on turn 1. If you are not, if you haven't mastered it, if you haven't spent 1,000 hours of just shuffling up your deck and drawing the starting 7 with Ether Vial every single time, just don't bother, in my opinion. Because when it comes to other Vial decks, I think spirits are have the highest delta between their Vial draws and their non-Vial draws. And if they don't have a Vial, it's not that hard to beat spirits out of control, because you can just they can't tempo you out, because if they don't have Vial, they can't both play their Lord and protect it with Spell Queller. So if they don't have a Vial, Supreme Verdict is very good against them all of a sudden, because they can just have this Spell Queller or this Selfless Spirit on an instant speed. But yeah, if spirits draw Vial, then every spirit is good, because they can just put it into play on an instant speed. You can't counter it, and they can just wreck you. But if they don't have Vial, then to answer your question, I would still say that the biggest problem is probably it depends on the draw. It's either Spell Queller or Selfless Spirit, or from time to time Mausoleum Wanderer if they draw like 3 copies or whatever. But it's
basically
mostly
all the interactive spirits.
Yeah, but it's mostly Spell Queller and Selfless Spirit, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Selfless Spirit being the one that
grants indestructibility. Yeah. So if you have a Verdict draw, then Selfless Spirit is the last thing you want to see. And if you have more like Fatal Push draw, then Selfless Spirit is whatever, because you can just push it as well.
Right. Excellent. Thank you very much for the question, MTG Ectoplasm. Sam Kamenovsky says, question, can you please stop beating me?
Well, you can tell me your motto nickname and I will go a bit easier on you.
Zach Fowler asked, any consideration for the 4-mana Kaya in the sideboard?
Okay, to answer this question, I will need you to show me the card, because I've never.
Yes, I don't even know this one either.
I don't think it's legal in Modern, is it? I don't think Conspiracy is
not even
legal.
So that's the answer. It is an illegal card.
Or is there a different 4-mana Kaya? I don't think so.
I don't see one here. I see a 5. I see 6 mana.
Yeah, I think there's a 5-mana one from Kaldheim.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Unless Zach meant the Kaya's Wrath, which is a sweeper effect. That
okay. Let's talk about that anyway. Sure.
People were suggesting to me, or probably also they could have meant the 3-mana Kaya. That's a fairly popular suggestion as well. So very quickly about the sweeper, it's not playable. You can't pitch it to force. It's counterable. The mana cost is abysmal with Cryptic and Archmage Charm in your deck, and you will gain from 0 to 2 life out of this card most of the time. So it's just useless in comparison to Supreme Verdict, in my opinion. Also, I see Damian in chat. I promised to him that I will greet him. So, dzień dobry, Damian. Jak tam?
Dzień dobry, kaktusowy szmak.
So yeah, okay. But about the 3-mana Kaya, you had some different questions.
Yeah, this is a great question here. How important is the win condition in a control deck? Is it vital to have the right one, or is it more important to play whatever but have a strong shell? Because I think one of the biggest questions I received when talking about Esper control is, what's the win condition? Like, how do you win with this deck? Are you literally winning with Snapcaster Mage? And I'm like, well, got a little bit more than that. You could like Ultimate Jace the Mind Sculptor. You could also bring out a force of 1/1 tokens from Kaya's Guile. But effectively, like, it seems like you're trying to shut out your opponent completely, maybe exile their entire battlefield, and then you get in there with the Snapcaster Mages.
Yeah, I think that it's a very good question. And it's a question that a lot of people ask. And I think the quality part of win condition is way more important than the quantity part of win condition. So, for example, in Blue-Black, as I've said, I really missed lack of Teferi, Hero of the Minari. I really missed Teferi because it's just such a good win condition. But I wasn't missing like 4 copies of it. That could be 1, that could be 2. It's way less important. So I would say that it is important to have a right win condition, but the shell is the important part. So if there wasn't a Teferi Hero of Dominaria, I would be sad, and I would play something like, I don't know, more Jaces probably, because Jace is pretty good. Or if I need a 5-mana Planeswalker that can win you the game, you can play, I don't know, Gideon Jura, which is obviously not very popular in Modern because you just have Teferi Hero of Dominaria, which is amazing. But if you don't have it, you can just play Gideon, or you can play Gideon Ally of Zendikar. You can have some win condition. And there are a lot of strong cards that you can win the game with. But the shell is more important. About the deck itself, I would say that most of the time you are winning by them scooping to your Teferi Hero of Dominaria deck. It's
just
very
have
hard.
7 cards in hand, and they have nothing.
Yeah, it's basically they basically scoop to an uncontested Planeswalker mode most of the time. It's more likely for them to scoop to Teferi Hero than Jace, because if you ultimate Teferi Hero, which goes up faster than Jace, because you want to plus Teferi anyways, and you'd rather brainstorm Jace if you don't have to just win with it. Mm-hmm. If they just see the emblem, and then if you play Jace and you brainstorm and you exile their free lands, and they are like, okay, sure, that's enough. Unless they want to just eat your clock on Mono, then it's very unlikely for them to not scoop. So I would say it's mostly scooping to Teferi. Killing with Snapcaster Mages comes up fairly often as well. And you mentioned Kaya's Guide, which is actually mostly important against, I think, Jand, against like a traditional Jand, which is, I think, unplayable. Which is Bloodbraid Elf is just not a good card. Just play that Jand Shadow if you like.
We have a second person backing me up that Bloodbraid Elf is overrated.
Bloodbraid Elf is only playable if you can play it on turn 2 from Arbor Elf and Utepes Pro. Don't play, like, if you want to play Jant, just play Lures and Bubble. It's better than anything that Jant can cobble up together. So, but yeah, against decks like traditional Jant, against Eldrazi Tron, against these mid-range decks, it's fairly often that you make them sacrifice their creature, you make a 1/1, then you play Snapcaster Mage, and repeat the same process, and you just get 2 tokens in Snapcaster Mage, which is a 4 power clock, which usually can kill them in like 4 or 5 turns, and you just turn the corner this way, and yeah. Winning with beats is also a fairly common occurrence. Or stolen creatures with Archmage's Charm.
Right, yeah, that's actually one I totally forgot about. I missed that one. You can steal
it's mostly against Charm. It's fairly common against Death Shadow to just steal their Death Shadow, which is like usually you can navigate the game into the scenario when you are both when they attack you with Death Shadow, which is not lethal, but it leaves you on low enough life total that if you steal it, it's lethal for you. Like you can kill them with it. So, for example, they just attack with like 3 creatures. You take it from 15 to 4, and then you steal their Death Shadow, which is like, I don't know, they have like 7 life, whatever, 8 life, but you have 4 life. So you steal it, you have a 9/9, and you just attack with it. So it comes up most often against Death Shadow and then against Prowess.
Right. Hey, why Esper over Jeskai?
Why Esper over Jeskai? Mostly because I think the most important thing to me when I'm choosing my control deck is the interaction that you can play in any given group of colors. And Lightning Bolt is not as good as Fatal Push, because Lightning Bolt can't kill Death Shadow, can't kill Scourge of the Skyclaves, can't kill, I don't know, Tarmogoyf, can't really kill stuff like Sprite Dragon all that well. So it's mostly about Lightning Bolt v Fatal Push, and then you have stuff like Kaya's Guide, which is also a draw to white-black. I would say that one card in Jeskai specifically that I'm somewhat interested in is Nahiri, the Harbinger, which is something that people tried post-bans, because Nahiri was a successful control deck in 2017, I want to say.
Yep.
Right after Ancestral Vision got unbanned, you play Ancestral Vision with Nahiri. You can either suspend it on 1 or discard it with Nahiri later on. And now we even have Force of Negation to pitch your Ancestral Vision if you draw it later on. And this combo-esque kill, I think, is a fairly enticing and unique part of the deck. Also, the fact that Nahiri can come down and -2 on Heliod and just exile their Heliod, I think is a fairly important part. But I'm just not willing to give Fatal Push up. It's just so important.
Right. Thomas Perry has a great question. What meta would facilitate an Inquisition of Kozilek over a Spell Snare in the main board and a Thoughtseize in the sideboard?
Okay, that's indeed a great question. I think a topic of discard spells v counter spells in control decks is the one that is somewhat unexplored, and people are just defaulting to a very simple rule, which is discards plus counter spells equals bad, and you just don't play it. Which mostly, I think, stems from the times when people were trying to play blue-black decks in Modern in like 2016 or whatever, and they were playing Liliana of the Veil with their counter spells. And that's indeed bad, because you can't plus Liliana with counterspell in hand, or like you don't want to do this if that's your only card. So Liliana of the Veil is indeed not that great with counterspells, even though I've had some success with Fairies in Modern. I've actually top 32 day GP in Modern in 2017 playing Fairies, and I believe this is the only Modern top 32 that Perilous Research had, which is a nice little card that I really liked. But yeah, in general, I think that Inquisition of Kozilek over Spell Snare isn't that great in almost any metagame, I would say. Spell Snare is pretty decent because it can play well with your counter magic plan. It can be pitched to Force of Negation, but Sideboard Thoughtseize is definitely something that I would consider in more control or big mana or combo metagames. If Modern isn't all about killing each other with early creatures, then I think Thoughtseize is a perfectly fine sideboard option over stuff like the Sideboard Force of Negation, or over any other card in your sideboard again.
So what decks would you bring this in though against?
Okay, so it's definitely great to have a mix of discard and counter spells against both control and combo. It's a very, very deadly mixture because you can poke a hole in their plan, and then you can line up your counter spells against their hand because you have the information, and the information is super powerful. So I would say against control, against combo, against some big mana decks, especially if you bring in sideboard the Teferi Time Ravelers, or if you have Teferi Time Raveler in your main deck for some reason, which I don't recommend. But definitely there are some spots against the slower decks that are trying to outplay your counter magic with stuff like cast triggers off of their Eldrazi's, like Ulamog or Kozilek, or with Cavern of Souls, like Amulet Titan does, or like, I don't know, Veil of Summer from combo decks, because, okay, they will veil your discard spell, but then they won't have discard, they won't have their veil for the next turn. So definitely a lot of decks against which Thoughtseize is a good sideboard card. I would advise against playing main deck discard spells. I think they were very good with Uro, because with Uro, it didn't matter if you top deck a dead counter spell, because you have this 6/6 card drawing giant in play, and you didn't really care about this card advantage, because having one that discard wasn't that important as it was to pave the way for your Uro early on. But right now, I would just delegate discard spells to sideboard for a specific metagame, which is, I don't think, now. But yeah, once again, if Amulet Titan gets bigger, if stuff like Control, Combo, Tron, yeah, definitely against these decks, Thoughtseize is a wonderful, wonderful weapon.
ZSX asks, is Choke a decent sideboard card against control decks?
Well, it depends on the control deck. For example, if you take a look at my mana base, it's actually fairly choke-proof. You can still get God with it. And it was a very good card against Mystic Sanctuary deck.
We've got the River of Tears showing up here.
Exactly. When you had Mystic Sanctuary and you were just playing all islands, basically, it was way more deadly to face choke as a control deck, or boil for that matter. But right now, for example, if your starting hand is a filter land and a fetch land, you can just fetch a Godless Shrine and then filter your Godless Shrine through your filter land, and it's somewhat likely that you will have, I don't know, 5 or 6 lands with play with 1 or 2 islands. It's not that rare. So, and on top of that, Teferi Hero of the Mineral can untap your islands, and you can just laugh in face of choke. But if you're playing against stuff like Blue Moon with a lot of islands, by all means go for choke. Choke is very good against them. Choke is probably decent against most builds of blue-white with a lot of basics, because they have like 6 or 7 islands, and they are harder on fetch lands, for example, because they are playing, I don't know, 2 copies of Logic Knot, so they want to play, I don't know, 8 fetch lands instead of 5 fetch lands and 3 Glacial Fortresses or whatever, then definitely. But I think it's a very hit or miss card, and I would rather play some other good cards against control. Depends on which deck you are playing in particular.
Would you have any thoughts on this? Mono Bluetron, does it count as a control deck?
I think so. I think Mono Bluetron is a control deck. I think that Mono Greentron is pretty close to being a control deck as well. So I would classify as a more of like control deck than most people, but Mono Bluetron is definitely a control deck. You are using this Tron Bump in mana to cast your Haymakers way ahead of a curve, obviously. But if you think about it, Mono Bluetron is a deck that will fairly often go turn 1 power plant map, turn 2 mine, and crack for an island, not for Urza's Tower, because you need blue mana. So I think it's actually because they are playing mono blue, so you don't really have good removal spells in mono blue. So what can you do against an aggressive deck if you are playing mono blue and you don't have push or path or bolt? Well, you can play turn 3 Wormcoil Engine because you have Tron lands. So actually ramping up your end game is taking place of interaction that other decks have. You are just speeding up your game plan instead of disrupting theirs. And then you can use cards like Condescend or Repeal, which are way better if you have 8 mana on turn 4 instead of 4 mana on turn 4.
Gotcha. Neat question. Zenix Zenon asks, have you played Control in Pioneer recently, and what do you think is the best version for the meta?
I have not. I played a lot of Pioneer once it released, almost a year and a half ago. It's actually one
like
of the
rest of us, we just dumped it after a little while.
Yeah, I was actually one of the first 10 people who ever trophied in Pioneer, so I will have that forever. But I think that blue-white might be okay right now. I don't know much about Pioneer, and I assume it was actually pretty shaken up by Uroban. And I've had some friends told me that Nevmizet is very good in Pioneer right now. I think a lot of power came from Kaldheim for blue-white. I think the Hengegate pathway, which is the blue-white pathway, is very important for blue-white. Blue-white always missed early white untapped sources before. I think Bind the Monster is definitely a playable main deck card, which is 1 mana aura that can tap their creature. Because
I love the card.
Blue-white was very, very bad against turn 1 Llanowar Elves. And now you have Bind the Monster, which can kill Llanowar Elf effectively for 1 mana and 1 life. And finally, I think Foretell cards are pretty decent. The fact that you can Foretell on your turn but on instant speed means that you can, for example, you have Behold the Multiverse, and the one that's, I think, even more important for Pioneer, which is Saw It Coming.
Saw It Coming, the counterspell.
This is the Foretell counterspell.
Yeah.
Because, for example, if you don't do much on turn 2, you can just Foretell this, and then on turn 5, you can play Teferi, Hero of the Minaria, untap your 2 lands, and have counterspell with it, just up. You don't have to pay 3 mana for your Absorb. You can just pay 2 mana for, so it's coming. And even if you don't have it on Foretell, you can play Teferi, Hero of the Minaria on turn 5 in your end step, untap 2 lands, and Foretell in your end step, because it doesn't say Foretell only as a sorcery. It says Foretell on your own turn. So you can Foretell of this mana, which I would assume comes up fairly often. And once again, I don't have many experiences with Pioneer recently, but I would start with Blue-White if I went and play Pioneer.
Gotcha. Thank you very much for the question, Zinnik. Here's a great one from Play M. What is the most important to know when you're learning to play Control?
Oh, that's a very complex question, I would say.
Give your top 3
okay.
tips you gotta be paying attention to when you're
okay.
Like someone says, I'm gonna be a Control player. I don't know anything about Control. I've been playing Burn my whole life. What do I gotta know?
Okay, so first of all, if you're playing Burn your whole life, you're probably spending your whole life playing a harder deck than Control. So, because I think the popular opinion is that Burn is a mindless deck, and I would say Burn is actually somewhat hard to play properly. And I would say that Control is rather easy, maybe because I played tens of thousands matches in my life. But I think Control in most formats is fairly straightforward. For example, in Pioneer, it was just play Verdict, play Sweeper, play Planeswalker. It was pretty easy.
I mean, what Control has that makes it, I can resonate with what you say, but one thing that I think makes Control easy is that it plays with powerful cards. So it has these 1 card almost game winning. When you Verdict in certain scenarios, your opponent now has nothing, and the game plays itself from there.
Definitely, I think because aggro decks has so many, Control basically has fewer large decisions in the game, and they are more apparent. And aggro deck has multitude of small decisions on every single turn, like starting from fetching to sequencing your threats to saving up burn spells. There are a lot of things that you have to consider while playing an aggro deck. So to me, I think aggro decks are actually, on average, in Modern, I would say more skill intensive than Control. But let's get back to the question.
Yes. What do we need to know to become good at Control?
I would say that the most important stuff about Control is to have a plan for the game. You have to know how the gameplay will play out in a given matchup. There's actually a pretty great article by PV when he was still writing for Channel Fireball about having a plan. If you Google PV article, plan, whatever, some combination of words, it will probably come up. Because I think it also ties up nice to the question that somebody put on the chat, which is also very popular, which is how do you beat Greentron? You just have to have a plan. You have to know what do you want to do with your cards, especially with so many model cards. You have to go into the matchup and know which modes you usually are aiming for to utilize. For example, especially with Esper, it's so easy to just default to draw 2 cards. But for example, against Tron, you are discarding their cards more than you are drawing, probably. Aside from situations in which you are having free lands and you need to draw the 4th one from Cryptic or whatever, and in this case you obviously draw, but past turn 5 or 6, you discard against them most of the time. And you just have to know what's the plan, what your cards need to do. Obviously, being patient is also important, because there are so many cards that are just very contextually strong if you wait enough time for them to entrap your opponent. Another great content by PV recently on YouTube, when he said that Shuhei is one of the best players with bad cards because he's very patient and he can extract the maximum value of his cards. So, for example, most common scenario against Dredge, you can just wait with your Chaos Gale for so long to just get everything you need with it. You just don't fire it up after 1 or 2 Shriekhorn activations. You're just waiting, and finally you have a stop in their draw step, and when they have enough cards to escape Ox of Agonas and just completely wreck you, you will finally use your Chaos Gale. So I would say having a plan is very important, patience is very important, and a very good question about how determining a good opening hand in game one on the blind, which is, I think, also a part of learning to play Control. I think in general, you just have to accept your losses from time to time. And I am very loose about my keeps. Game one on in the dark, I think keeping Teferi Hero of Dominaria opt and 5 lands is perfectly fine hand on the play if you don't know what you are playing against. I think it's important to mulligan a lot post board, because your powerful cards, your planeswalkers, or your good cards in the matchups are usually strong enough to pull you ahead, even if you are on 5 or 6 cards. But pre-board in the dark, I will keep all kinds of hand, especially on the play. On the draw, I'm a bit more reluctant about keeping them. But on the play, for example, Teferi Hero of Dominaria Mana League 5 lands, easy. Cryptic Command Mana League 5 lands, easy. And I guess one more point about it is that if you open a hand with 3 Fatal Pushes in Modern, you will keep it. You will get paired against Tron from time to time, and you will lose this game. But it's okay, because when you are picking up Esper, you are deciding that you want to win against creatures, and you are accepting the fact that Modern is all about creatures. So on average, 3 Fatal Pushes is a great hand. Sometimes it won't be, and sometimes you will get pummeled, but it doesn't matter, because it's important to remember why you are picking this deck and why you want to play this. And it's very important that, it's similar. If you're playing some more, if you are playing in a metagame with more big mana, you will keep a hand which is good against big mana in the dark more often, because you are expecting to see it. So basically, one rule of thumb, if you just want to have it when you are keeping hands in the dark, just keep a hand against the more. If your hand is good against most popular 2 or 3 decks, just keep it. Sometimes you will lose, but most of the time you will just win.
Gotcha. Excellent. Charles L., I'm so sorry. Charles gave a super chat earlier, and I thought he was trying to submit a deck list for us to look at, but he actually just had a regular question. I'm so sorry about this. Richard Phillips is doing well with Esper Drago, but it has no planeswalkers and wins with Shark Typhoon. I still can't see the deck list here, but what are your thoughts on Shark Typhoon as a win condition in control decks?
I am familiar with the deck list,
Okay.
so I don't need to say it personally. I think Shark Typhoon is a terrible card. It's a very overrated card. I think it might sound harsh, but I think Shark Typhoon is mostly a card for people who are trying to feel smart by winning control mirrors in a format which is not at all about control mirrors. Like there are control is just not very popular in PTQs, in challenges. Just as you said yesterday in your video, there are some people like Spike, like me, like Oscar Franco, who will just win with control. Okay, but in general, control is very rarely seen on the highest levels. So why would you build your deck in a way that beats control in a metagame without control, really? That's, I think, what's important to understand, that Shark Typhoon has a much lower floor than people are willing to admit, because people are just basically copying their standard Pioneer, historic, whatever decks, and they're just assuming that a floor of cycling and making a shark is a good card, because it is in standard. It was similar with Teferi Time Raveler, because the floor of just bouncing and having a Planeswalker on 1 for 3 mana was good in standard, and it's not good in modern, in my opinion. And there's just so much competition over your deck slots. Like, I think right now in my 60 cards in the main deck in Esper, there's not a single card I want to cut to even try something out, because I don't know what to cut, because everything is so necessary. And if you're playing Shark Typhoon instead of a Planeswalker, you just have much fragile win condition than a Planeswalker, because it's just a creature. And hard casting Shark Typhoon is basically a pipe dream. So if you are cutting your Esper or Archmage's Charms for it, then you are trading a 3-mana gain control of your 1-drop or draw 2 cards for 3 mana, make a 1/1, draw a card, which is not a good card. I get there's a flexibility to this card, obviously. And I think there's maybe an argument to play a 1-off from time to time. I think the only deck that this card really organically belongs in is Stoneblade, the blue-white Stoneblade deck, because if you have Sword of Feast and Famine, first of all, the value of 1/1 flyer is way higher if you have equipments in your deck. That's obvious. Second of all, if you connect with, for example, Sword of Feast and Famine on Swordforge Mystic, you can float the mana in the damage step, make a token of this mana, which is usually just unspent, and then you can untap and proceed with the game. So I think specifically in Stoneblade, I really like Shark Typhoon, but in any other deck, I would just play more Charms or Planeswalkers and just play Shark Typhoon as a 1-off from the sideboard if you want, if your metagame is very control heavy or whatever. But right now, I would just not play it.
But one follow-up question: is the card good in a control mirror?
I think it's a good sideboard card for control mirror. I think game 1 there is just too much useless removal lying around, and everybody will just, okay, I have Fatal Push, so instead of discarding 2 hand size with this Fatal Push, I will kill your Shark Typhoon token.
Right. So game 1, it actually doesn't even interact very well against control decks.
Yes,
but in game 2, when they start siding out the removal and you start bringing in the Shark Typhoon, it's more high impact then. So it's just like it's like slow versus the decks you need some early interaction against, and it's not even that effective against the control decks.
100% what you said, exactly. And if you want to have a good control card, just play Vendilion Click, okay? Vendilion Click is insane, and it's also a great card against big mana, because it's basically a Thoughtseize that also flies and deals them damage. Because against big mana, you don't care about card quality, you care about or about card quantity, you care about quality. So it doesn't matter if they are 1 card ahead of you when you play this instead of Thoughtseize, but it matters that you just bottom their Primeval Titan or their Karn or their Ulamog or whatever. So if you want a good anti-control card, play Vendilion Click. It's very, very good. And don't play Shark Typhoon.
Thank you very much for the question, Charles. Sorry that I missed it when you gave me the super chat. Okay, well, I don't know where this question came from, but the Iron Warlock says, would it be viable to add Gideon Jura to the main board, or is it at all a sideboard option?
So as I've mentioned before, I think Teferi, Hero of Dominaria invalidates every other 5-mana Planeswalker. It's just better than everything else. Because if you're playing a 5-mana Planeswalker that doesn't have a plus ability that draws you cards, it's so bad if they don't have a creature. So I would definitely not play Gideon over Teferis right now. I wouldn't play it in the sideboard, really. I think if you want to play Gideon in the sideboard, both Gideon of the Trials and Ally of Zendikar are better for different purposes.
James asks, what's your backup deck when you're bored with Esper?
It's Merfolk.
I'm sure it's not Merfolk.
It's not Merfolk. But actually, I'm not really getting bored by decks, and I can play one deck for like 3 months. But I think the last league that I've played with a deck that is not Esper was with Storm. I really like Storm. Storm is very cool. It is one of the first decks that I think this is the first deck that I ever took to PTQ, back when Sifting Song was legal. So I think Storm is very cool. I think if I had to play a big tournament and I won't be allowed to play Esper, I would play Jump Death Shadow. Lurus decks are very, very cool in my opinion as well. I like this small ball card advantage mechanism, which is Lurus of the Dream then plus Mishra's Battle. It's so low maintenance, it's so powerful, and it just complements these decks so well. So yeah, if I had to play a tournament and it wouldn't be with Esper, I would probably play Jump Death Shadow.
Pierce Tattersall asks, how is Blue Moon positioned at the moment? A bunch of decks around that aren't prepared for Blood Moon. The only issue is Bolt isn't the best removal spell at the moment. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think Blood Moon isn't that, or Blue Moon isn't that great, even though Blood Moon is probably okay-ish, because Blue Moon just gets eaten alive by fast decks, and that was always been the case. I've played a lot of matches of Blood Moon. For the first couple of months, I started grinding Mono. I was playing Blue Moon Freedom Reach or another Blue Moon deck almost exclusively. I think I've played over 1,000 matches on Mono with Blood Moon and Islands. And I think Blue Moon is one of the best control decks for Control Mirror. So if the meta is slower, then Blue Moon's stock definitely rises. But if the meta is all about Swift Spear and Death Shadow, it's not a very good idea to play Blue Moon, in my opinion.
Just a question. How much time do you have?
Right now, probably like hour and a half more. Basically,
okay. We'll be done before then.
I'm basically unlimited.
Do you love the discussion? Don't forget to give a like. This is a fire discussion we have with TSPJendrek. Matt Maddock has a question. Thoughts on the new ward keyword as a control player? Do you think it might become relevant in Modern, or is it too easy to play around those types of effects like Unsettled Mariner?
Oh, it definitely depends on a deck out of which you face this effect. For example, Unsettled Mariner out of a deck with a lot of other taxing effect can be very dangerous for control players. Like if you are playing Spirits, you have Unsettled Mariner, but then you also have Mausoleum Wanderer on top of this. Or if you are pairing Unsettled Mariner with Thalia, Guardian Thraben, or if your opponent has a Phantasmal Image and they have multiple Unsettled Mariners, it's definitely about the saturation of taxing effect, but it definitely can be a very powerful weapon in like aggro players' arsenal or tribal players' arsenal against control, definitely.
How do you play against Blood Moon?
How do I play against Blood Moon? So one of the most important things is that you can use Esper Charm to destroy enchantments, which is something that people forget about.
Finally, a relevant enchantment to destroy with Esper Charm. I totally forgot about that.
I would say that two most relevant enchantments to destroy are Blood Moon and Utopia's Pro. These two comes up the most, even though coming up the most means like 2% of your charms probably, but or whatever. And I also think that you can fetch basics way more aggressively than people think, especially with filter lands, and you can leave your fetch lands uncracked. I think that this is something that people do way less than they should have. They are just cracking their fetch lands EOT all the time because that's like an autopilot mechanism, because you want to save 2 life from your shockland or whatever. But if you are playing against a deck that you know they have Blood Moon was burnt, you can just leave your fetch lands uncracked unless you need it.
Right. Just a backup question. What are all the matchups you want to use the target player discards 2 cards mode on?
Okay, so the highest the single, like the average card power is, the more valuable discard is. So you're playing against Tron, you will use it fairly often. You're playing against Amulet, you will use it fairly often. You're playing a Control Mirror, you won't use it in the game 1, but you will game 2, because game 1 they have Path to Exile and Pushes, and they will just discard their removal spell.
Right.
Game 2 they have all good cards, unless they sideboard it poorly, but you will win anyway in this case. It also comes up against aggro decks when they tap low, and they just spew all their cards, and you can get like burn. For example, it's somewhat common to get burn with discard 2 when they are low on resources. They are tapping down on your end step to crack their canopy, because it's in general it's hard to get burn with Charm unless there's this canopy spot, because they have 1 card in hand, they have 3 lands including canopy, they tap 2 of them, they draw a card, now they have 2 cards and 1 open mana, and unless they have Lightning Bolt, and Lightning Bolt is the only 1 mana instant they are playing in their deck, you can just discard 2. I remember that Destroying Enchantment is also kind of relevant against enchantment creatures, which is mostly Eidolon of Great Revel and Giant of Elysian Grove. So yeah, I would say that against.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
against
Dryad.
against these two. It's mostly against Dryad. Against Eidolon, a 3-mana point removal spell isn't that great, but against Dryad, it comes up fairly often as well, I would say.
I would love to have that available. Yeah, of course. Just destroy this stupid thing. All right, excellent.
Yeah, I don't like it one bit as well. So.
Excellent. How do you come to the conclusions? How many the split between Archmage's Charm and Esper Charms? Because you actually have more Esper. I don't know what your exactly latest deck list is, but seems like you have mostly chosen 3 Esper over 2 Archmage's Charm.
Yes, this is one of my favorite questions to answer. So I'm really glad that somebody asked it. So as you can see yourself, both Archmage's Charm and Esper Charm are somewhat similar cards. If you discredit the third mode of both of these, which is destroy enchantment or gain control over 1-drop, which are used somewhat rarely, you can just balance them out, and you can say that they are both like of equal value, and then you are left with a Divination Counterspell split card and Divination Mindrod split card. So Divination Counterspell split card is a better card than Divination Mindrod split card. That goes without saying. But because you have so many different counterspells, the added value of your 10th or whatever counterspell isn't that high because you already have so many of them. And Instant Speed Mindrod, it's such a unique effect that it's actually better to have a third copy of this over a third copy of Archmage's Charm.
This is an excellent answer. All right, we need the discard spells. We counter enough stuff. We have enough counter spells in this deck. How is the Death and Taxes matchup against Esper Control? How do you find this matchup?
It's also very dependent on Vial, similar to Spirits, but I would say on average, if they don't get you early on with Leon and Arbiter, or get a fast uncontested Stormforge Mystic, it should be okay. I really don't like talking about matchup percentages because I'm just winning more than most people. So my opinions about like percentages are biased because I'm just winning more. So I would say like if I just have to go to my percentages, I would say that Esper Control doesn't have any matchups below 50%, which is just not true. But I think that one thing I like about Esper is that I think the matchup spread, like the actual matchup spread, is very flat. I don't think that there is a single deck that you are worse than 40% against, and they aren't really decks that you are better than 60%. So you're basically gravitating towards 50-50 most of the time. I think you're above 50 against both Hilliard and Death Shadow, which is important right now. But you can lose every matchup, you can win every matchup, and it's more about how it plays out. Just if you're playing with a control deck or any deck with fetch lands really against Death and Taxes, just remember to respect the Leon and Arbiter because it's the easiest way to lose when you just crack a fetch land with them having Vial on too because you haven't cracked it in your main phase, even though you had no reason for not cracking it. You just think about it for a minute. So yeah, respecting their Arbiters is very important, and their Flicker Wisps too.
Fetch land's hard to play with. Sometimes you just want to leave them in play untap, and now you're up against Death and Taxes. You got to crack that thing when you have the free opportunity to get that land out.
So you can see the trend. Basically, my biggest advice is to think when you're playing Magic, which is quite obvious. But just don't autopilot your cards. Don't autopilot your fetch lands. Don't autopilot your charms, your cryptics, your Chaos Guides, whatever. Just think about it, and maybe at the beginning you will just lose on time on Modo, or you will get draws in paper. But alongside your growth, you will just start getting more proficient at playing these decks, and you will play them faster. And yeah, the biggest advice one of the greatest advice I ever had on, or I've ever heard from someone else on how to play Magic is to just play a lot. This is what Greg Kowalski told me one day, and that's what he told Canister when Canister asked him how to be good at Magic. He just told him that you just have to play a lot of Magic, and now you can see where they are both. And I think most of my Magic accomplishments, I don't think I'm like super talented. I think I'm a smart guy in general, but I don't have this like universal talent for card games. There are a lot of people who just pick up any card game and they are super good at it. And I don't think I have it. But you just have to put a lot of work. And you have to work smart, but you also have to work hard. There's no, you don't have to pick one of those. You just have to do both, and just put in the hours, put the hours in very very thoughtfully. You can watch your reviews on Modo. So I think it's something that people underutilize. I think I'm fairly good at getting a feedback from my games without going into my reviews, but I think it's something that if you are struggling with improving, you can just go to your game log on Modo. You can pick any match that you played. You can just go over it. You can think about why you did certain things, and this feedback from yourself basically is a very valuable tool to improve.
Mm-hmm. Halfway Joe asks, what are the best sideboard cards against Esper control?
Okay, so there aren't any best sideboard cards against Esper. I don't think that Esper can get shut down by sideboard cards. It's more about strategies. You are not beating, in general, I don't think you are beating control decks with singular cards. You are beating them with play patterns and with strategies. But if I have to choose some, like obviously a well-placed Veil of Summer is devastating. A Blood Moon, you can cut off Esper people with Blood Moon off guard from time to time, and it will be devastating as well. Like if you time well any of those like very big haymakers, it's very effective, obviously. But I wouldn't say that there's a single best card. Basically, now you at this point, it used to be a time when you were playing against like green deck and they had front the last troll and you couldn't do anything about it, like 5 years ago or whatever. But these days you have answers to basically everything. You have Teferi that can tack any non-land permanent. You have Kazgal as a main deck edict effect. You have Supreme Verdict. You have Cryptic Commands, Forces. You basically have answered to everything. So I would say it's about playing these high-impact sideboard cards like Veil and Blood Moon and just time them well.
Thank you very much, Halfway Joe, for the question. Not a Pussy Slayer. How do you feel Remand is in Esper control?
In general, I like Remand in control decks. I think that it's important to split your 2-mana counterspells because every modern option is basically has a diminishing returns. So you can't just play for mana leaks because you'll just have them in your hand later on. You can't really play for remands. Right now, I think you can't play any remands because metagame is so aggressive. But if the metagame slows down, just feel free to switch 1 or 2 mana leaks for remands. In a similar vein, you can't play for logic nodes because your graveyard will be too taxed. And this whole problem could be resolved by reprinting Counterspell in Modern Horizons 2, which somebody mentioned in chat, or several somebodies.
It's been speculated on since Modern Horizons 1 got announced.
Yep. It was speculated ever since they've said they were very close to print Counterspell in Dominaria, but ultimately they decided it was too strong for Standard. So It was a long
be for Modern Horizons, but then didn't show up. The beta of Counterspell shot up by a million.
Yeah, but just imagine that you had Dominaria with Teferi Hero and Counterspell in Standard. It would be so absurd. So it's very good that they didn't print in Dominaria. For me, I think the biggest reason I would want Counterspell to be printed into Modern is actually twofold. First of all, you can hit the view all prints, and you can show off the sweet Tempest Counterspell with a red pointy guy. This is the one.
This guy?
Yeah, but there's an old frame probably somewhere below. But yeah, this is the best Counterspell art. Don't at me. It's not even close.
No, this is the best one. We can do a poll. I'm gonna win. Okay, here you go.
I even have a counterspell power ranking on my computer. It was on my old computer, and I don't think I've synchronized it yet. So
I guess I should make some counterspell tier list video.
Yeah, this is my favorite
art.
And I have a playset of these in Japanese, which are very sweet. So this is one of the reasons. And the second one is that every single time I'm showing off my deck on Modo, I have to move Logic Knot from X's to 2s, and it's driving me crazy. So basically, what I'm saying is that I don't think the impact of counterspell would be that high. I think it's a
neither do I.
I think it's a perfectly fine card. Mana Leak is virtually counterspell in so many matchups, and it's easier to cast. And the biggest matchup in which counterspell is better than Mana Leak is the mirror match of control decks. So if you are better against other control decks, the overall power level of control doesn't go up because you are just better against each other, which doesn't matter. But,
and Tron. And who's
like
bleeding
Tron
any tears for Tron?
Yeah, basically like Tron or Amulet and stuff like this. But I think against like aggressive decks, it will be more common for you to get screwed by your blue counterspell if you are playing like 3 or 4 non-blue lands in your deck. Then it would be by not being able to counter something with Mana Leak. So I would say counterspell is a perfectly reasonable card to have in Modern, and yeah, it's basically a quality of life upgrade in my opinion, because you don't have to split Mana Leaks with other stuff, but you can just play for the counterspells and be done with it. Because the actual strength of counterspell is that it doesn't have that severe diminishing returns as other options, because you can just have 4 counterspells and it's okay.
Hot Cold Man asks, are counterspells or removal more important right now?
I don't think it's that easy to answer this question. If I had to choose, I would say removal, because the format is all about fast creatures. But it's also vital to have counterspells against stuff like, for example, Heliod, because the truth is that Heliod is pretty good against removal as a deck. Removal isn't great against Heliod. For example, in my list, I have 4 pushes and 1 eliminate, and I'm not bringing the second eliminate from the sideboard. Because you can't remove Heliod with a traditional removal spells.
Yeah.
You can't really interact with their combos if they are playing patiently enough and they have a lot of layers of protections, is what I like to call them, which is you play Heliod and then you have, for example, Conclave Mentor, and you have Ballista with on 2. So for 4 mana, and they have 3 counters on it. And now you have to have 2 removal spells to deal with it, because they can remove the counter twice. Or for example, they have Pendelhaven as well. So you once again have to have an additional removal spell, because when they have 1/1 Ballista, they can just Pendelhaven it and then remove the last counter, and it's still a 1/2 EOT, and they can win with it. If they have Oriok Champion and they play 2/2 Ballista, they will gain a life and they will put a counter on Ballista. So they will have a 3/3 Ballista, and if you respond to it by killing Ballista, they still will combo out the traditional way, and you still have another removal spell. So Heliod is very good at setting these multiple layers of protection, which requires you to have multiple removal spells most of the time. So I think I would say it's equally important to have a good mix of counter spells and removal spells, and mostly because of Heliod. Because, for example, against Death Shadow, I'm cutting out most of my counter spells because they are pretty bad against discards, since they are so time-sensitive group of cards, and discards can just poke the hole in your defenses so well by just picking up your counter spells. But yeah, against Heliod, I think it's important to have counter spells, and Heliod is, I guess, another matchup in which discard 2 mode comes fairly often, when they are sacrificing their Ranger Captain of Eos to protect their Ballista from counter spells. You can get them fairly often with discarding the last 2 cards, which comes up somewhat often. You have to keep that in mind, that discarding the Ballista in response to Rangers Captain of Eos suck is something that you will do.
So this complements a question that you answered earlier, but to get better with a new deck and as fast as possible, should you be playing best of 1 or best of 3? in terms of like playing as much Magic as possible.
Okay, so you can't really play best of one on Modo. So I assume this is somewhat of an arena/paper question when you are testing with your friends. I think it's really important to play sideboarded games as well. I think it's really important to test. Like if you are testing in paper, not on Modo, you have so many options to test even more efficiently. For example, this was one of the things that I've learned from Canister, because when there was still paper PTs, and sometimes he didn't have a team, so he just, because we live like, I don't know, 40-minute walk apart, and it's like 3 miles from each other or whatever, he can just pop up to my place and we'll playtest paper Magic. So like if you're playtesting paper and you want to see how good the sideboard card is against your opponent deck, for example, we are playing against, I don't know, we are playing against Burn, and you want to see how good Core Firewalker is against Burn. In this example, it's obviously it's very good, but you can just draw a 6-card hand and put your Core Firewalker into your hand and have it every single time to just see how good it is. So I think it's very important to play both boarded games. It's very important to test what you actually want to test. And I think in Modern, it's still better to play BO Freeze. I assume if you want to play, also if you want to play with control deck, I think it's more important to play BO Freeze. Maybe if you are playing aggro deck and you have more proactive plan yourself, it's just better to jam a bunch of game ones and just get proficient. Or I guess, especially with aggro decks, on like your beginner entry level, you just want to jam as many game ones to get as proficient with your deck as you can. Mm-hmm. And then you can start playing more BO Freeze, so you can start to use your proficiency to adapt to certain sideboard situations.
I think especially with control, the game might really be starting in the sideboard anyway, whereas for these proactive strategies, the game starts for them at least in game 1, and then the onus is on the opponent to be playing proper sideboarded matchups. So with control, you definitely should be playing a lot of best of 3s, because exactly. That's really where you're going to be getting your edges from. You're going to have all those dead cards game 1 with Fatal Push versus Tron, but then you're going to make up for it post board when you have like a much better tuned deck.
Yeah, and it goes both ways. If you will just play a bunch of game 1s against Jund, and you will win because they have 2 or 3 Fatal Pushes or Dismembers or Decays in their hand, the post-board games are also different from your opponent's perspective. Yep. So definitely, with control, definitely BO Freeze.
Colin Davis, thank you very much for the super chat. Not exactly control related, but we'll try to answer it. How do you feel about the position of humans in the current meta?
I'm not thrilled with it. I don't think it's very good against Heliod, because they can't beat Infinite Life. Cards like Kitesail Freebooter are pretty bad against Heliod. Talia is bad against Heliod as well. They have Skyclave Apparition to deal with your Meddling Mages. Even if you Meddling Mage Heliod, they can still hit it off of Company. So I would say that because humans seems to be pretty bad against Heliod, I would in general not play a deck that's bad against Heliod. I think that having a bad Heliod matchup can be only acceptable if you are great against everything but Heliod, and there are not such decks in Modern because somebody would have already played it, probably.
So one issue I have with humans right now, like it's fine, but it's definitely not well positioned. Its biggest problem is it's got too many 50-50-ish or worse matchups. Like, again, like this can be an auto loss against Heliod. They've got a lot of interaction. But even Tron, they have no edge versus Tron. That's like 50-50 or worse. Amulet Titan, same situation. Maybe just plain losing now thanks to Dry to the Elysian Grove that can just blast their whole board away. Burn is a good matchup. Jund Death Shadow, I don't know where that stands right now. I know against Jund, it's like, again, another 50-50-ish matchup. Like, do they have games against these decks? Sure. But you want to be... If you want to talk about humans being well-positioned, it needs like a strong edge against these decks, and it doesn't have a strong edge versus a ton of the top decks in Modern at the moment. It's just like these really awkward 50-50 or worse situations.
So yeah, I would say that when it was a time that humans were a big player in Modern, and I was actually interested in how these matchups plays out, I've been told that Jund somewhat preys on humans. Mm-hmm. But On the other hand, humans were one of the best decks against Grixis Death Shadow. So I assume the position of Jan Death Shadow is somewhere between Grixis Death Shadow and Jan. So I would say it's probably a bit humans favored, but not by much, I would say, just from my observation.
So there's not, like, for humans to be very well positioned needs like a lot of matchups here where it's like, oh yeah, great against this, great against that, great, but it's like just a lot of like really awkward matchups. So I mean, that's basically the position of humans, at least at
I would
the
say
most
that
competitive level.
Yes, I would say that if the metagame is hostile to Kai'Sail Freebooter plus Meddling Mage combination, then you just don't want to play humans, because that's the biggest strength of it. Because humans just as a zoo deck won't cut it in these days. Like, Modern is too fast for humans as a zoo deck to be a viable one-dimension deck. But if you have the other dimension, if you are a disruptive zoo deck, and your disruption is actually viable, then by all means humans could be a great choice.
Here's a neat question. Rodrigo asked, what kind of card do you want in Modern Horizons 2 that Esper doesn't have right now?
No, I don't like speculating against these cards because like, there is nothing that I can really think of that I can imagine, that any card that's non-existent at this point that I would like to invent and just put into the set. As I said, Counterspell would be a nice QL. Well, I guess I had a discussion on our podcast with Sodek and Alan about it, and we did our top 3 cards reprinted in MH2 from older sets than Mirrodin. And I think my top 3 was obviously Counterspell. Then I've had Riptide Laboratory because it's one of my favorite cards. It wouldn't be super good, but bouncing Snapcaster Mages is all I want to do. And then my third one was probably either Innocent Blood or Baleful Streaks. I think Baleful Streaks might be a bit too good because it incentivizes this play patterns in which creatures aren't that great. And for example, when Icefang Card was around in a much more dominating fashion, there was almost no room for Tarmogoyf in the format, and I don't like playing Modern formats in which Tarmogoyf is unplayable, because I think it's okay to have creature decks in Modern, and Baleful Streaks would be just a bit too efficient. Okay, one card. I guess there's one card I would like to see in Modern.
There's one card.
And that is not in existence yet, and this is basically an eliminate without mana cost restriction. Just one black instant, destroy creature or planeswalker. I think it's a perfectly fine card for Modern. It's basically an instant speed 1-color Dreadbore or something. However
you want to put it. 1 mana eliminate?
No. 2 mana eliminate without the CMC restriction. Just 2 mana.
Destroy. Oh, I see. Destroy a creature or planeswalker.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine on a power level for Modern. It would obviously be too good for Standard, so you can't never put this card for Standard. But I think it's a perfectly fine Modern card that you can print. You can make it white-black, you can make it blue-black. Just don't make it green-black, because green-black already has so many. Green-black and red-black already has these type of cards, so don't make it these two, basically. But I think blue or one black, just mono black cards of this sort is a perfectly fine card to have in Modern. That would be a nice addition.
This is a great question from D-Ty Gaming. Learning how to be patient.
I touched about it a bit when I was talking about what I think is important when you're playing Control. As a person, yeah, definitely being patient is very important. But also it's important to recognizing when you need to strike. It's also very important. You can't just hold off on everything every time. You just have to play to your odds, and sometimes you just have to take a risk and make them have it. Like, for example, I don't know, you are playing against Burn. Sometimes you just need to slam Jace, Fate Seal them, and if they kill you, they kill you. It's very often comes up against stuff like Burn, against Tron, against Amulet. You can't afford to wait till you have Jace plus Mana Leak, because they can just kill you by now. So you just have to play your Planeswalker on turn 4 or 5. You have to plus on them and just hope that they don't have it.
Here's a question I got a lot. Being Who Exists asks, is Drown in the Loch any good in Esper, or is it too limited?
I don't think it's good because of Chaos Gale mostly. Because you will end up exiling the graveyard with Chaos Gale a lot.
Oh yeah, okay.
And this is the tension between these two cards that I think is unacceptable for you. I really like Drown in the Loch as a card. I think it's very strong. And I think it's playable even if you don't resort to some unplayable enablers like Thought Scour, which is one of my favorite cards, but it's very bad, in my opinion, at the same time. But the tension between Drown in the Loch and Chaos Gale, I think is too much to ask. But if you're playing blue-black, by all means, play Drown in the Loch.
Deki Nohei asks, how about 2 copies of Monastery Mentor in the sideboard as a finisher, especially if the opponent boards out most of their removal in games 2 and 3? And you actually play 1 Monastery Mentor. So the guy's probably asking, like, should we bump it up to 2? And what is the plan? So, like, what is the plan for Monastery Mentor?
So Mentor is basically another Planeswalker, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's the slot that was previously occupied by Elspeth Sun's Champion. You just want another threat against creatures decks, because Mentor can dominate creature decks very easily, against big mana decks. And Mentor is basically the card that you want the most against stuff like Tron, while Elspeth Sun's Champion is the best card against like Junt, for example, like traditional Junt. And if you want to win a tournament, you have to adapt to winner's metagame. And in winner's metagame, there will be a lot of more people casting Primetimes and Karn Liberated than there will be people who cast Blood Brittle, because once again, it's unplayable. So it's just playing Monastery Mentor over Elspeth in this way. I think if Eldrazi makes a comeback, I would play Elspeth Sun's Champion again, because it's one of the best cards against Eldrazi. But in general, it's just another. I don't think of it as a first copy of Monastery Mentor. I think of it as a 5th threat that can take over the game. And you can play 2 copies, but I don't think there's space in the sideboard right now. I think the space is pretty limited.
Excellent question, though. I definitely got this question a lot myself. How about this? Thoughts, mobile enthusiast, thoughts on Brazen Borrower in Control?
It's definitely a nice tool to have, especially from the sideboard, because it can allow you to deal with some unpleasant permanents post-board that people tend to bring in. And in this deck list, Teferi Time Raveler is basically having the same function as Brazen Borrower would have in blue-black when you don't have access to white, which is the ability to deal with opposing permanents. And I think for like a pure control deck, the body is a bit too irrelevant, especially since it can't block ground creature. So, for example, if you're playing Stoneblade, and this 3/1 flyer can actually hold an equipment, go for it by all means. But in Control, I think it's a bit too lackluster on the creature side to play it as a main deck card. Sideboard, perfectly fine.
Right, gotcha. In your opinion, what are the best matchups in the current meta for Esper?
I would say that the best matchups, like as a group of deck, is Death Shadow decks. It's still like 55-60%, whatever. It's still definitely losable. They can still not draw you with Thoughtseize and Veil of Summer and stuff. But I think Death Shadow is, on average, a pretty good matchup, because you have so many removal spells. Chaos Gale is insane against them. You can just kill their Scourges by gaining life. You can make them sacrifice Scourge and exile their graveyard, so lose is limited. It's a very hard matchup to lose post-board, I think. Game 1, definitely losable. Post-board, not so much, but sometimes they will get you post-board, and that's enough.
Zhao asks, hey Nikachu and TPS, I don't have the second Teferi Hero of Dominaria. What can I use instead? So what are some like good budget options for these win conditions in Esper?
That's a problem, I think. I don't think there are good options that are on the budget. I think Ashok Nightmare Muse isn't terrible. The fact that it doesn't draw you cards when you're plusing it, I think is a reason that I've never considered it really. But if you don't have the second Teferi, honestly, I would just add another Archmage's Charm. You don't need win conditions, really.
You just need your opponent to concede.
You can just play 1 Teferi, 2 Jaces, and it should be enough as well.
Well, how about the Monastery Mentor? Could you
Or
play that main deck?
You can play main deck Vendilion Click, I guess. Monastery Mentor is a bit too incoherent with your instant speed game, but main deck Vendilion Click, perfectly fine, in my opinion.
Excellent stuff. All right, now I think is a good time to start getting into deck list review. But for anyone who's made it this far and you want to learn more from TSPJendrek, where can people find you?
Okay, so I stream on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday on Twitch. Every social I have in the internet is @/TSPJendrek, so it's pretty easy to find me. You can find me on Twitch, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Patreon. I am making baby steps into YouTube as well, but I would say mostly Twitch and Patreon if you're looking for content. And yeah, Twitter if you want to see me sharing my thoughts, sometimes not about Magic, but usually about Magic.
But if you want to learn more and follow TSPJendrek, you can absolutely do that by finding all those links to Twitter, Patreon, and Twitch in the description below. So absolutely make sure that you follow him for that high quality control strategy. But for that, we're going to start moving into deck list review. I think we'll have time for at least one deck list. Hopefully it's a control deck list. I don't know if you've ever been on the show before, but we review deck lists. So if you want to be eligible for your deck list to be reviewed, go into the description, join my Discord. In my Discord, there is a channel called Deck List Review. And in that channel, go use the command !review deck space, give the URL to your deck list, and you'll be eligible at random for deck list review. And as we wait for people to submit their deck lists, we are going to thank my sponsors, FusionGamingOnline.com. This is the Canadian local game store. You can get all your paper, single, sealed products, and more. Support the channel by using coupon code Nikachu. It gets 5% off all your purchases and also lets them know that I sent you. We're also going to thank Mana Traders, the premier place to rent Magic cards online. Basically, the way you can play any deck. You want to play all versions of Control, Blue, White, Jeskai, Blue Moon, and Esper. You can do that with Mana Traders. Support the channel by using my Mana Traders link in the description below, or save 15% off your first 3 months using my coupon code Nikachu.
Yeah, definitely Mana Traders, a great sponsor. I've started my Mana Traders sponsorship yesterday or 2 days ago.
Congratulations!
Actually. But don't use my link. Use Nikachu's because mine is only 50% off of your first 2 months, and he can give you a better deal.
But no. It's got to be universal. It's either I have.
2 months. They said to me that it's only 2 months.
Then I got to contact them to make sure that it's only 2 months, because like they made some stupid switch. No, like we have the same deal. Everyone has the same. There's no way they're going to give preference to anybody. So if it is only, I'll be pretty upset because I keep advertising it as 3 months. Then when really it's not. I'm gonna double check with them. Yeah, we all got the same deal.
Okay,
but they've flip-flopped on some stuff before in the past.
Nevertheless, still use Nikachu's link because it's his show, not mine. So
it's okay. You support the people you want to support. That's my motto.
But if you ever come to my Twitch, dear viewer, please support me.
There you go. Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of people who I'm sure have watched my show, and they're like, "Well, I don't really need Mana Traders," but then they like watch you. Oh, I want to be in control. Then that's the moment you start supporting TSPJendrek.
I think that Mana Traders is a pretty decent, like in general, rental services, but Mana Traders because I'm sponsored, obviously, and I also think that Mana Traders is, like, aside from sponsorship that I have, is the best place because of Mana Trader series. And if you have Mana Trader sponsor account or subscription, you are eligible for much bigger prizes during this series.
10x the prizes.
It's like 10x. Is it 10x?
Yes, it's 10x.
Oh yeah, so it's like
you either win $100 or you win $1,000. It's a big jump.
So yeah, and I think this is the biggest like online series of tournaments now in pandemic. You can play on Modo. So
and it's free.
It's free
every month.
It's free every month. It's just printing money. So if you want to win some money, definitely check out Mana Trader series. And I think rental services are pretty good if you are undecided on what you want to play, because you can just switch your decks every league basically. I myself was always hesitant of my rentals because I am really particular about versions of cards that I'm playing. And I really don't like that sometimes obviously you can set up preferences right now, but you still, from time to time, you will get like mismatched fetch lands or whatever. And I can't stand it, definitely. So
yeah, I told them both that too. Like you get 4 copies of 4 cards. I asked for a 4x of one card, and I'll get like 3 different copies. And then when I'm like doing the deck tech, I'm like, oh, this looks hideous.
This is also when I started playing Modo a lot. There weren't really that many rental services, so I just bought all my cards. And
yeah, we had to.
And now I won't sell them because I like my old versions of cards. But I will definitely. I think it's also very good if you want either to play different decks, or if you're a streamer yourself, you can start doing like dono decks with it. I will start doing that on my channel because you can just play so many different decks and you don't have to buy all these cards. So definitely, Mana Traders, big ups.
Well, there was some value to me for a rental, even though I stick to just Merfolk. There was still value service to me for a rental service because there comes points I need to play test a very large quantity of cards that I've never used before as the metagame changes. And I found that I was buying and selling the cards constantly. Like, let's say I buy Noble Hierarch and then sell it back, then I lose like $8 afterwards, because you usually get like an 8% loss, and if Noble Hierarch at the time is $25. And I buy 100 ticks worth of cards and sell it back, I only get like 92 ticks worth back. You keep repeating this process often enough, and then like you're down like hundreds of dollars.
Oh, I've lost countless amount of dollars in my life.
That's where the rental services can kick in.
Exactly. Like, even though I've only paid for my tickets once in my life when I started playing Modo, and then I went, as people like to call it, infinite, and now I'm Modo rich, as we say. As we call
We're
it
Modo rich.
We are Modo rich, as we call it with Sodek. But still, I'm losing. I was still losing money on daily basis. But now with Mana Traders, if I ever want to play Chalice of the Void in my control sideboard, I won't have to purchase them. Or if I want to play, for example, even if I'm playing, a lot of Modern, and I have basically every Modern deck I want to, when I want to play Legacy PTQ from time to time, so I don't have to buy Wastelands. I can just rent them, or I don't have to buy Moxen or Black Lotus or whatever. I don't have to buy vintage cards. I can just play it. I can play Standard. I can play everything because rental services are great. Especially if you don't mind mismatched cards, then it's perfect.
Well, yeah, you don't own them, so we can't complain. All right, Bazooka 96. Congratulations, you're the next contestant on Decklist review. We've got something called Yorian's Ungiven Ideal. I have no idea what we are expecting here. Some sort of enchantment.
I would say that they have Gifts Ungiven, Yorion, and Enduring Ideal in their deck.
That's what I want to say, but I see a bunch of enchantments here. Dovescape. Whenever a player plays a non-creature spell, counter that spell. That player puts X. Okay, so they put X/1/1 bird, white and blue bird creature tokens with flying into play, where X is the spell's converted mana cost. Well, that can be ridiculously expensive. Oh, but whatever. They're everything's gonna get held down by like, Solemnity could. Sorry, Ruined Halo could name the bird token.
No, but they have Solemnity and Phyrex and Unlife to lock out.
Oh, for infinite life, basically.
Yes, and 9 lives as well.
Yeah. So. Form of the Dragon. This
is
a
win
condition, right?
Yeah.
Lay Claim. You control enchanted permanent, or you can cycle it. Ley Line of Sanctity. 9 lives. Oblivion Ring. 4 Omen of the Sea. Overwhelming Splendor. I've actually lost this card before.
Yeah, definitely. It was somewhat popular in Legacy a couple of months back.
Phyrexian Unlife, comboing with Solemnity. Players can't get counters. Counters can't be put on artifacts, creatures, enchantments, or lands. But you can't get, like, infect counters is the point. So you don't lose the game for having 0 less life. And you'll never get infect counters put on top of you because Solemnity says, no, that it doesn't work anymore. Ruined Halo, choose a name. You have protection from the name card. And Spreading Seas. That's a very odd choice in this deck. I don't see gifts ungiven in here, unless it's in like the sideboard.
No, it was before. It was below lands. There's an instant section below lands.
Okay. Well, oh yeah, you're right. There is gifts. Oh yeah, there is a gift ungiven, and then enduring ideal. So we have Heliod, Skyclave Apparition, 1 Snapcaster Mage, and this is a Yorion deck, so this is 80 cards. It's like way more cards than usual. Oh, they made a new Field of Ruin? Oh, they put in the old border?
Oh, I don't like it, personally. I don't like the orangey text box of the old lands. It's like...
It is orangey. It is orangey.
And I don't like the purple set symbol. That's why I'm kind of down on the old border reprints. It's weird.
And then this is the win condition, basically. Search your library for an enchantment card, put it onto the battlefield, shuffle your library, and then you get to do it every single turn, because that's what Epic says. For the rest of the game, you can't play spells, but at the beginning of each upkeep, copy the spell except for its Epic ability, and you just put an enchantment in play until you've won the game. Spell Twine. You have some thoughts?
Yeah, like with Enduring Ideal, the Dovescape that you highlighted earlier is also a win condition, because you just make 7 birds on every single of your turns, I think. Or if you copy it, you don't cast it.
What do you mean?
Because there was a bird enchantment early on.
Yes.
That just counters all the spells. So if you have it, do you just counter every single copy of your ideal every turn, and you just got 7 birds every turn?
Oh, no. I see.
Oh, I don't think copying is actually casting, so probably not.
Whenever a player, well, it says plays. Okay, we got to go into Dovescape's converted. What is the Oracle text?
Yeah,
I think when you casts.
Yeah, I think it doesn't work, but it's still a very good defensive tool.
Spell Twine. Exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard and target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. Copy those cards, cast the copies if able without paying their mana cost. Exile Spell Twine. Maybe there's a real good reason to have this in your deck.
So I would say that basically you're looking for gifts ungiven, and your pile is Enduring Ideal, Spell Twine, Snapcaster Mage, Noxious Revival, something like this.
Right, okay.
And you're just getting effectively 4 ideals. I would say
that's why we got the Control Master here, unlocking how this deck works. We also have a Noxious Revival, which I'm sure you can also get with gifts ungiven.
Yeah, that's a staple of gifts ungiven decks, basically.
Yeah.
1 copy of Revival.
Silence and Lotus Bloom to ramp into that ideal. There's a little bit of comments. Enchantress-based deck with Enduring Ideal as main win con. After resolving Ideal, the goal is to lock your opponent out, then win with Form of the Dragon. Even though Ideal is 7-mana spell, it's possible to cast it early due to Lotus Bloom or Nykthos. Deck contains a lot of ETB effect enchantments like Ruined Halo, Omen of the Sea, Spreading Seas, which synergize well with Yorion as a companion. Also includes gifts ungiven for either finding Ideal or enchantments needed to lock the opponent. The worst matchup for this deck is definitely Tron. The only way to win is to resolve Ideal before opponent gets too much value on the board. Even with 4 Spreading Seas, 2 Field of Ruin main board, it's very difficult. Any ideas on cards that are good to counter Tron in white-blue would be welcome. I don't really like Damping Sphere since it hurts Nykthos. The other bad matchup is Control, but 4x Sphinx in Sideboard makes it bearable. And we have a bit of a sideboard here. Only 1 Ghostly Prison in this entire deck. Usually when I'm up against this deck, there's like 4 Ghostly Prison. And 1 Yorion. You can randomly play Yorion in this deck.
No reason whatsoever. And if you have all these enchantments, you want to blink. Why don't you have main deck Yorion on the sideboard? That doesn't make sense at all.
So you think actually we should be playing some Yorions in the main deck?
No, I was joking about the companion mechanic. But honestly, I think you're better off playing a straight blue mono white version of this deck. I think that's my take on it, because this is a deck, at least in my experience, that's very, very good against specific stuff. And you only play this deck against this specific stuff in this specific metagame, so you want to be as streamlined as possible. And this version is probably better if you want to play this deck in every single tournament, because it trades a bit of this streamliness for more versatility with gifts, which is something that I don't think is that great.
Well, I think
because
it also finds the win con faster because when I'm up against these decks, they don't have any way of finding the what's it called?
oh, the Enduring Ideal.
Yeah, enduring ideal. So like it comes a game of like how many turns are you going to give me to find an answer to what's on the board versus you naturally drawing an enduring ideal. Whereas when you have gifts ungiven, they can force the issue a little bit when they have the mana available.
It's somewhat true, but also you are playing for Enduring Ideal, which is basically a one spell combo deck, and you are playing 80 cards instead of 60, which is also a big drawback in my opinion, because you will just find them a little less often because you just increase your deck size for
What if we just
little
like
purpose.
cut it to 60 cards though? Like I'm not sold that this 80 like playing Yorion has like any synergy here, really.
So yeah, this is basically what my issue was. Like I can be sold on the gifts and given idea with 60 cards. I think that might be okay, but I think with cards like Enduring Ideal, you just want to find it as often as possible, and one of the best ways to do it is just cut 20 cards that you don't need from this deck. There are definitely some. You are playing 2 Celestial Colonnades, just cut them because they are unplayable, and you are down to 60 to 78, and you're just 18 more to go.
And like you're not even trying to win with Celestial Colonnade anyway.
Yes.
It's not like what this deck is trying to do. And my guess is like if this deck is weak to Tron, then it's just going to be weak to Tron and like don't even try. I find that Spreading Seas is like actually really bad in Modern right now. It feels terrible, and I'm like a Spreading Seas deck, but I need it for like unblockable island block. But like I can see why it wouldn't even be that good against Tron, because you're not exactly a fast aggressive deck, and they'll just like they'll just make natural land drops anyway and like beat you. So don't even try this plan. Just focus on the other decks that you can beat.
Yes, I think that people are going too much for the Tron mana, while the whole fact that like the whole reason the Tron is a good deck is because they can find their mana so resiliently and so efficiently in general. So there is no reason, in my opinion, to go for their mana unless you can win the game fast. So if you're playing a control deck, like they will just cast this Karn Liberated or on turn 7. If you can't beat it on turn 7, you will lose this all the same as you would lose on turn 3. It doesn't matter. Right. Like if you can't close out the game, then don't do this. So I would say that this deck possibly can close out the game with relatively high speed, but one Spreading Seas is enough, and I would just cut blue, and I would add Blood Moons if you want to beat Tron. Because with Blood Moons, if you have your Lotus Blooms or your ramp spell, you can play, I don't know, something like Talismans or some other mana rocks, whatever. You can ramp up to 7 mana, and with this Blood Moon, it will hold down the fort for long enough that you can actually win the game. So if you are troubled with Tron matchup, then definitely switch to Blood Moons, because Spreading Seas can't do anything really really meaningful, I would say.
But I personally don't mind the gifts ungiven idea, because I remember my own experience against this deck. Doesn't win quickly. It absolutely depends on locking the opponent out. But you know, if it takes 10 turns to find your enduring ideal, that also is 10 draw steps you're giving your opponent to find some way to answer it. So I actually don't mind. This is a sort of a fresh take on enduring ideal that I've never seen or heard before.
Oh yeah. That part with gifts, just tutoring enduring ideal, is actually pretty okay, I think.
But we don't really see the value of playing Yorion, especially if you're not even trying to win with Yorion. Probably not, you know what I mean? And if you did go to 60 cards, then all of this actually gets better. And maybe you don't even need 4 copies of Gifts Ungiven and 4 copies of Enduring Ideal. You might be able to cut like maybe 1. I don't know. I don't know how consistent this needs to be in order to definitely win the game on curve. But I hope that is some... Well, let's look at the sideboard. Do we know any good cards for the sideboard?
Well, I can see 4 useless cards in the sideboard.
Okay.
There are 4 copies of Swings of this Final Word, which is exactly the type of card that will only win you the game once against control. And once your opponent is aware that this is the card that you are playing, it will be useless, because you will pay 7 mana for it, and they will cast Supreme Verdict that will have post-board anyways because you can pitch it to force, or they will cast Kaya's Guy, or they will cast any other way. They will have ways to deal with it. It's not 2015. People have answers to cards like this, and you can cheese them out once, but this is not a sustainable plan to win against control.
Yeah, exactly. So replace this, you have more copies of something else. I
really do like Favor of the Mighty, though. That's a very nice card.
Favor of the Mighty?
I really like this card.
Each creature with the highest converted mana cost has protection from all colors. Okay, interesting.
So this is actually a Boggles deck, because they can't enchant their Boggle. So we're playing this against Boggles, and they just have a 1/1. It was also popular against Infect out of Ad Nauseam in like 2015. So that's why when I learned about the card.
Nico says, the one upside of playing 80 cards is that this deck has a toolbox package. It won't get found that often in 80 cards. But like, you know, so Storm sort of has a toolbox package too, but it can play with 60 cards.
Well, this is an argument that is somewhat enticing to me, but much less so in a deck with one spell they really want to find every single game.
Mm-hmm. Because it's sort of like I don't know, control combo deck. It's like, does Scape Shift get better playing Yorion? I mean, like, no, it doesn't.
Yeah. I would say it's similar. Like, I would say it depends. For example, Oops All Spells in Pioneer was such a deck. You were just playing 80 cards.
There's some weird niche examples where it does work
because in Oops you had 8 creatures.
Mm-hmm.
So actually the value of playing Oops was a very specific deck because you were playing. You had to play really bad lands, which were monocolor tap lands because of the requirement of the deck. You could only play DFC cards, and you actually needed to play more lands because your lands were so bad. So this is a different example. But regarding this argument, definitely, I would say that in this deck, I think it hurts it more than it helps because of the nature of the deck and how you always want to find Enduring Ideal, because you can't really win reasonably without it. And it's somewhat easy to cut 20 cards from this deck, I think.
Mm-hmm,
it's like 34 lands, so you can probably cut like 9 lands, I would say, to go down to 25, which is reasonable.
Yep.
And it's basically halfway. You are basically halfway there, as Bon Jovi once said. So you are like, you have to cut some cute stuff that's not really needed. Like, I don't think Heliod, God of the Sun, is needed, for example. Like, you don't need this win condition. You already have different win condition. You can probably cut Spreading Seas. You can cut like Omen of the Sea if you go mono white, and if my math is correct, you are on 62 cards at this point. So finding the last 2 cards isn't that hard, I think.
Right. All right. I hope that was some valuable feedback. Hope that helps somebody. But that's going to be it for Coffee and MTG. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining me today. Just a reminder, all the replays can be found at the alternate YouTube channel, Nikachu MTG Streams. Thanks for everyone who shows up to all the channels for Coffee and MTG. I will just remind everyone that we do this Monday to Friday, 9:00 a.m. Central Standard Time. So I'm going to one more time thank very much to our special guest, TSPJendrek, giving us like that deep insight into Esper control and just control in general. It was a wonderful conversation, and this conversation is impossible without all of you. If you're not here for this conversation, then there is no conversation. We're not talking about anything. So thank you very much for making us a part of your daily routine. So any last words before we go?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for having me. It was a really pleasure. If you ever have another free slot and you want someone to babble about control for another 2 hours, then I'm open every Friday. That's not a problem. Other than that, thanks for watching us. Like we are not in this for money, basically. You can find another jobs, but the community is what makes it real, at least for me. And also, once again, I want to say hello to to Damian Ficus, because I promised him so. And also there was one question earlier about if Lurus or Ballista should be banned in Modern. I would say that nothing should be banned in Modern right now. Modern is super good, and we can just wait another 3 months for Modern Horizons to maybe ruin it, but I hope not.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so everyone, keep brewing up those coffees, and we'll keep brewing up Magic. I'll see you guys next time.